Good evening. So it's been a while. I look today, it's been a month and a half or so since I've spoken about anything, right? On this at least. And what's interesting about the time being away, there was no real conscious reason for staying away. And to be honest, the time kind of just got away from me then. So I thought I was taking a bit of a week or two of just finding a bit of balance. And before you know it, a month goes by, heading into a second month going by. And what's really interesting about that is you realize how easy it is to continue on your life and not be touched by the topics that we'd be used to speaking of here and that many of you are probably interested in on a day-to-day basis. So it's understandable how many people can go through their life and kind of look at you askew when you mention certain things, because unless you're actually applying yourself and taking or making the conscious and deliberate choice to look into some of the things that are impacting on this nation as a whole, not on your personal life and an individual basis, but on the nation as a whole, it will pass you by, right? And you could even spend your life in total ignorance of some of the most severe decisions and actions and consequences that are unfolding in this country at the moment and to the people of this land, right? So I took a bit of time away, as I said, to find a bit of balance in myself, right? Because what's, again, another interesting thing, loads of interesting things, right? To me, at least, is I found myself kind of, I won't say pigeonholed, right? But getting stuck in the political realm of conversation and ideas and things, right? Because there's a want in me to make people feel better and make this country better and make people not just feel better but be better, right? Make their lives better, because I want my life to be better, right? And if people are miserable around me, then that eventually the waters spill into your doorway, right? So if you can add anything to making the country a little bit better and adding a few more smiles and a bit of purpose into the people you're around, and even to the people that you might never meet, then that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing for myself. That's a good thing for those that come after me. That's a good thing for the people in my life that I care about. But again, balance, right? So I would imagine a great majority of my videos are talking about the political atmosphere in the country at the moment. And that's not true interest. That's not true. I have no interest in politics. I think it is the realm of the deceivers. I don't believe that we should be aiming. I think a country of grown-up adults does not need politics in the way that politics is run at the moment, in the way that how all-consuming it is in the country. I think that the type of politics that we have now is, people don't like this, but it's a direct reflection of the state of how we are as a people, right? And there's loads of different ways you can tackle that, and one of them is, number one, by looking at politics. So what is it, and what is it to be talking about politics? For me, it's talking about decisions that other people are making, right? And I can continue on in my personal life, and at the moment those issues don't really touch me, right? They don't really impact on my life in a glaringly obvious manner, right? Does that mean I should abandon interest in it? Absolutely not. Of course not, right? Because they're important things. But what it has shown me is that it's easy for me to slip into spending too much of my time and my interest and my attention on talking about people who are external to me, right? And again, as I started with it, balance, right? So my main interests are not the interests of politics or economics or any of those, the market, these sorts of golden calves of the modern age, right? It is out of necessity that I speak of these things. But there's other things that are falling by the wayside as a result of that, okay? And those subjects are my natural interests. And I think that what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? So I think we could all probably benefit from balancing out a few things. Again, I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do what you want, right? But I think we should absolutely slice off some time for devote what time you want to politics and the absolute lunacy that's going on, right? But I would also suggest reserving some time for yourself and for your natural interests, right? Because I was coming home earlier and I was listening to a song, and some of you'll probably remember it fondly. It is Dario G and Sunshine, right? And the video is people, it looks like they're on the plains of Africa and they're dressed up and painted in different animal kind of colors, right? So cheetahs and leopards and lions, all that sort of stuff, right? And it's a great song, and it made me smile, right? And it made me feel a little bit light, because it reminded me of, you get glimmers of memories, right? Give me a few seconds of nice memory, a feeling. It's only a few seconds of a memory, right? But the time is irrelevant, right? It's the feeling. And it had me thinking that there's a heaviness in this country, and rightly so, okay, rightly so. I understand all that, rightly so. But I would also question where the joy is, right? Because the way I look at it is this: I have no doubt that the people in this country will turn things around, and there's great people doing great things, and there's very ordinary people doing fantastic things in this country, right? And it's a beautiful thing, and it's lovely to see people getting together around a common belief, a common feeling, a common sentiment, a common aim, and buying each other up, right? And you can see those numbers have grown and grown and grown over the last few years, and it's much easier now to see people getting together and talking about things that would have been a faux pas a couple of years ago, right? And it's a beautiful feeling to stand with people who are of similar values, right? Maybe you're not total carbon copies of each other, but in certain instances your vision is aligned, and that's a beautiful feeling. And I would love if everyone would experience that, because mountains move with that sort of feeling, and a sense of camaraderie, and a sense of having a bit of steel put into you because you have people beside you that are with you, right? And I think that is one of, I wouldn't say one of the symptoms of the disease that we're suffering, but I would say it's nearly one of the causes, is giving up on the community, right? And look, you can suggest that there's a load of reasons as to why the community has kind of lost its prestige in certain areas in this country. And one of them, it may not even be intentional, right? It's just a case of, as we move along, technology changes and we develop new technologies, and then it takes us a bit of time we get sucked in by the television, right, the technology, and then it takes us a little bit of time to kind of catch up with ourselves and to realize, number one, what the new technology has given us, but also number two, what it has taken away, or what we have given away to spend time with that technology, right? And a lot of the time, it is the company of other people, it is the company of our neighbors, it's the company of friends and family members, right? So the relationships probably aren't as tight as they once were in this country, and we suffer accordingly, right? But the speaking of the political stuff, the growing number of people who are aware of the dangers that are going on, because you spot the dangers, right? Because we're instinctual creatures, we have instincts and we spot danger. And I think we all do, and then some people shy away from it, others deny it, and others just go to meet it, right? And that's the way we are. But again, as I started with this, I feel that there's a lack of balance, and that's in myself as well, right? So I think that the speaking of politics for myself is to be devoting a serious amount of time to the present moment and the actions of people that are outside of my life, right? And I haven't been balancing that off in a way that balances me, right? And I think that there's a necessity for that. And I think that there's many people now who are spearheading the protests, spearheading the public speaking, spearheading that aspect of it. And I think that there's many different layers, or there's many different avenues in which we need to attack what is going on. And some of that is in a creative fashion, right? And in a building up the community sort of fashion again, right? And I think we do that by plugging into our own natures, right? So I mentioned the Dario G song that I was listening to, and it reminded me of being about maybe 11, right? About 10, 11, in that kind of age. And it's lovely because music, or smells even a lot of the time, they give you a window back into how you felt at a certain age. And as I mentioned, the feeling was a light feeling, right? A feeling of adventure, a feeling of adventure, a feeling of what are we going to do today, right? And I think we've kind of grown accustomed to the illusion that that's something that you park away and you give up that because you become an adult, and that part is dead and you move on, and serious stuff now, and bills and all that sort of stuff, and you trudge on through life. I don't think that that's necessary, you know? I think that is, those are the words and the views of the person that rationalizes away their own murder of innocence, right? Their own murder of being a child and looking at life as if some life had something to give it instead of being a burden, right? And I think that there's room for that as well, right? There's room for going on the attack, there's room for getting on the streets, there's room for claiming the streets, there's room for getting out and venting and channeling animosity and legitimate righteous indignation and anger towards the elements of this country and the people in it that deserve it, that warrant it, right? But what about the rest of it, right? So what about the jovial nature of things, the Irish element of it, the music, the dancing, if you're that way inclined, right? The singing, the storytelling, the getting to know people again, right? You see, was it on the RTE or whatever it was, the old people being in homes, right? Like that's crazy to think of that happening 30 years ago, right? It's nearly, and I suppose the lack of outrage with that, the lack of outrage, or maybe the felt outrage leading or not resulting in action, right, towards that, it kind of speaks of the fact that it's somewhat accepted, right, Asher? And that is nearly the end product of decades of the dilution and the erosion of community, right? Because the baton has to be passed and it has to be carried, right? So it's not just a given that you'll have tight communities that back each other and will go into the ground for each other, right? That's not a given. That has to be earned, and that has to be tested, and that has to be proven continuously, right? And I struggle to see where we're doing that at the moment, right? Because the protests are nice and that, but they're a positive, right? But there needs to be more on that. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, what I'm failing to see is an exploration as to how we got where we are today, right? How did we get here? How did we get into a position where we are here in 20 whatever year it is, and we're so accepting of a slow death, right? Or we're so accepting of our choice being spat on, the idea of us having any sort of volition or any sort of free will just being laughed at, right? Your identity being considered that of a mongrel, right? And even the fact that there's people in positions of power that are making money off of your money, that's how they pay themselves, right? They're ripping you off. And they make decisions over your life. And they feel strong enough and secure enough to be able to denigrate tens of thousands of years of your history. They feel comfortable enough to do that, right? Getting angry at these people is one thing, right? But at certain points, you kind of just go, well, that's what they're about. So there's nothing that they can do that would surprise me. The interesting question then is, why do we tolerate that? What is it in us that allows it to continue on, right? Why do we think that it's okay to be treated that way? Is it something that happened a year ago? Unlikely. Like, this stuff, it must be so built into our collective nature and character at this point, because there's, in comparison to the total population, right, the total amount of Irish people, the pushback and the people that are consciously choosing to engage with this stuff in whatever fashion is small. It's growing, but it's small. And you would imagine that when something so serious as is threatening your livelihood, your future, your children's future, you would imagine there'd be a bigger instinctual reaction to that. And maybe there is, but it's just not in terms of an aggressive one, right, to go and meet the challenge, right? It seems to be people implode in on themselves. And I think the COVID years really, really showed that. And that begs the question, how did we get here, right? So, look, I understand that a lot of people like the political stuff, but I think that there's a way of, you can kind of snooker yourself into that as well. And I have snookered myself in ways back into that, you know, because you're trying to reach as many people as possible. So you talk about the things that are most common because you want people to listen to something different, right? Listen to, I think, of a bit of reason to share, so you try and share it and you want to give it to the most people possible. But in doing that, then you kind of just stay on the day-to-day topics of things, right? And I can tend to avoid, as a result of that, delving into topics that I think are far more serious, and serious in a different way, right? And they are far more fruitful in terms of what we can take from that. And that is the question of, the serious question that will demand serious answers, not just one, but serious answers and serious attention to the question, and a fearless attention to the question of, how did we allow ourselves to get into this position? Why were we given this position? Because again, the baton is handed on, right? So what was it that was handed on to us that wasn't explained properly, right? like a parent and a child, right? You can pass on these tendencies, but if they're not explained properly to a child, they're not pulled apart and shown to a child as to how and why and what and where and who, then these things just become a given, right? They become an accepted second nature. So what was handed on to us, what wasn't questioned before it was handed on to us, what wasn't explained to us, what did we accept as a given, and what is it that in us that is allowing us to refuse to evaluate how we got here, right? Because there's some really blatantly obvious answers or signposts along the journey, right? We call them signposts that point in certain directions that are very obvious, but people are denying it, and people are also trying to kind of whitewash history a little bit and revert back to some of these signposts as a way towards getting past the troubles that we're in the moment. I don't think that's helpful, right? Again, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some positive elements to our past and there's some not so positive elements. In order to move forward, we need to make our peace with them, right? We need to take our strength where it's strong, and we need to divulge or divest ourselves from the weakness that we inherited and the weakness that we maintained and accepted, right? So I hope everyone is good. I hope you're enjoying life. I hope there was a bit of music that tickled the memory in yourself over the last day or two, or whatever the case is. And I hope there's a bit of lightness in your heart and there's a bit of joy in your soul, right? So yeah, look, I think what you're going to probably been hearing from me is some of those interesting questions. And if you want to come along with that, then beautiful. And if you don't, fine. And I think what I want to do as well is set up, I don't know how I'm going to go about it, right? But set up a group, a discussion group, and maybe even, I won't say a book club because it's way too difficult to get a group of people to all read the same book and then come back. So I might just take chapter or a point or an idea and have a group discussion around that, so people can come in, share with people, add to it, take away, and bring that away somewhere else, right? Because I think there's a time and a place for the political stuff, but we need more. We need more irons in the fire, and we also need to add our own interests, because I think the best way of touching people is with your heart, and the best way of touching people with your heart is by sharing your interests with them, things that you're passionate about, things that you like, things that are just part of your nature, right? So good evening, good to be back. And for people that have left messages, I haven't read, I just seen a couple when they flashed up on the phone, but I haven't gone in and read, so apologies for that. But thank you for the worry. There was no need to worry. Don't ever worry about me. If I'm not okay, I will be, right? And that's it. So thank you.